What's up? Welcome to episode 8. I'm not losing count. I think it's episode 8 of Let's Share the Eavesdrop Edition. My name is Joel. It's so good to have all of you here. Of course, not just the panel, but all of you watching. As always, I'm joined by Marianne, our youth team leader, and of course, my colleagues Zekwang and Dylan, and my fiance as well, Yifan, here with us. It is so good to have you all here. In the last episode, we actually talked about whether Christians can cohabitate or not. In the end, we actually said Christians can cohabitate with one condition, that is, you're married. Okay, so that was our conclusion. You want to know how our discussion went? Please go and check that out before you even watch this episode. I'm sure and I hope that it will be beneficial to you and your discussion, even with your friends, if you're going to talk to them about these interesting topics. Now, today we're going to talk about another interesting topic, and we're going one step further into the relationship spectrum. And today we're going to actually talk about marriage and when should couples actually talk about marriage, So, of course, among the five of us here, there's only one person who is actually married. And so I just want to find out from Marianne, even before we go to the actual question itself, how did Daniel propose, or how did you all come to that decision of being married?
So I think it's always bizarre. So it's quite interesting. I think 3 months into when we were committed to a relationship, I remember we were sitting in the car one night, and it was really funny because I actually told Daniel, I want you to guess something. I want you to guess something, and I'm going to write it out. And I kind of air wrote something. I think I wrote it on his hand, and I think it was along the lines of like, "Do you want to get married?" That kind of a thing. And I think
Break us all in the car.
and so when Daniel could guess what I was trying to say, I think he realized that that at least marriage was on my mind, and I think it was also on his mind. So what proceeded after that little game that we had was seriously contemplating what's the next step that we need to take, because we are thinking about marriage. So it's very early into our courtship that we were already talking about marriage. Very early, like I said, 3 months. Daniel knew that the first hurdle he had to cross was my dad. Yeah, because we were going out for 3 months. So logically speaking, I think when it was maybe 5 or 4 months into our courtship, then Daniel mustered up the courage to speak to my dad, who was actually actually more cautious at the beginning. But he told us to give him some time to pray. And so we prayed very, very hard. I remember giving my dad a hard time as well, daughters, we shed tears and all that kind of stuff, the drama thing. But my dad came back, and I think he was convinced that to go ahead was the right thing to do. So we were engaged very soon after we were going out, after we were in courtship. I think 6 months into our relationship, we were engaged. Yeah, but of course, the actual marriage itself was about maybe 11 months after that. Yeah, so I think the sequence is right. So how did Daniel propose? I think from the very beginning, I told Daniel, I said, I don't want anything fancy. I don't want anything public. I don't want anything special. Just do it as normally as you can.
Yeah.
And so I think Daniel showed up late at night. So I was still working in church. I was a church worker. He showed up to pick me up after work. So it was quite late at night. And there was no one in the church left, I think, except like maybe 1 or 2 workers who were taking care of the grounds. And Daniel came, and he had a huge thing hidden behind his back. And it was a huge teddy bear. I should actually bring it for you to have a look. It's a huge teddy bear. And then he got down on one knee, because I was coming down from the stairs from my office, right? So he got down on one knee. This is in the church building, and he asked, "Would you marry me?" I think it was January the 3rd. And I was like, get up. Okay, yes, I'll marry you. Just get up. The reason was because he knelt down right in front of a security camera, and everything was being recorded. And then I remember Daniel asking me, "What? So easy?" Like, yes, I will marry you. some sense, I brought up the question to you first, didn't I? Yeah, and like that, we were engaged. Yeah, so that's the short story.
Yeah. So how long was the engagement again?
We were engaged in January the 3rd, and then we were married on November 15th the same year. Yeah, so you can do the math because I'm not very good at doing math, but all within the same year. Yeah.
Cool. Interesting. So now I'm not going to share my perspective. I want to pass it over to my fiance and let her share her story first, or her side of the story about marriage. When did we talk about marriage, and why did we start talking then? And even the story of the actual decision to get married.
I actually don't really remember like when exactly we started talking about marriage, but like I think when we agreed to start dating, like marriage was definitely the end goal lah. So then while we were dating, we are just like getting to know each other even better and seeing like our family situation, and also talking about like lifestyle and goals in terms of like where we want to serve God, and which areas, and just trying to see if that align. Yeah, and I think the more we talk about like the future, the more we could see it come together. I think it was like maybe after 7-8 months of dating, around that. It's a commitment lah, and then each individual will continue to grow. And so as long as like it's a safe place, and you both want to serve God, then there's like nothing wrong with getting married. If there are no like big red flags or things you cannot, you feel like you really cannot, then marriage should definitely be part of the conversation. It varies from individual to individual, but I think what's important is like getting to know your other half's community, and like talking about different like finances and all those things, which we'll talk about later lah.
Yeah. I think as much as we talked about maturity even in previous episodes, a big factor is actually age lah, right? Because your age also determines whether you're working and studying and things like that. And so for Ethan and myself, we were in I was in my late 20s, and Ethan was in her mid 20s. So it was the moment we got into a relationship, we were already intentional, and we kind of like had talks about marriage, and that where we were going. However, I think as she said just now, it took us about 6 months to 7 months where conversations got a little bit more serious. When we talk about when should a couple talk about marriage, it goes, I think, back. If we go back a couple of steps and we talk about when should a couple be a couple, or when should a couple get into a relationship, it's very difficult to, or what I think is very difficult to give someone a very concrete answer or a very straightforward answer, because there are couples where they've probably known each other and been friends or even best friends for like years and years, and then they decide to take their relationship to another level, or another version of their relationship. Whereas for Ethan and myself, we were in a sense acquaintances. I won't even go as far as that, but we kind of like knew each other for a year plus, and then we were just put into a really close confined space in terms of serving together at a camp for 6 days plus, and then after that it started to have more. We started to have more conversations after that. So there was a lot of getting to know her in the first few months, and vice versa lah. We were getting to know each other really, not just in terms of our interests and what do you like, what do you not like, but really their mannerisms, things, their non-verbal cues. You can only learn if you are with that person a lot. So I think it will vary lah from couple to couple. We had actually talked more about when we wanted to get married rather than when we wanted the engagement to be, because we knew that basically we didn't want such a very long engagement. Growing up, I think the one thing I learned was that you don't want an engagement more than 1 year lah, or that was like a subconscious rule in my head. And there are many reasons for that. I think one of the reasons is because you already put a ring on it. You want to follow through on that commitment. You don't just want to, it's like booking something without actually paying for it. That's the way some pre-marriage counselors will explain the analogy, but basically the idea is that you want to follow through on your commitment lah. So we knew we didn't want an engagement for over a year. So of course, COVID kind of like had put a spanner in the works, and we still hope to get married within the 1 year of our engagement. But yes,
maybe I can chip in as well
Yeah.
as to why you might not want such a long. I mean, because this is a bit of a deviation from the topic,
Yeah.
but I do think it's important. I think that especially for Christian couples, when you have made this commitment for engagement, the heart is very deceitful. And that you can find yourselves in many situations saying to yourself, like, we're going to be married anyways. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there can be a lot of room for compromise. There can be a lot more room for temptation and things like that. So I think I also would recommend that engagement shouldn't be too long a period
Yeah.
as well, just because there is like, it opens up this whole myriad of new kinds of temptations that you might find yourself confronted with, and then you being able to compromise or to convince yourself like, hey, after all, we're gonna
Yeah.
get married, so don't ever do that. Yeah, don't ever slip into that kind of complacency, which is why I think I would support your stand in saying like, let's not make our engagement let's not drag it out for too long lah.
It's interesting how like y'all talked about, like, okay, serious about marriage while you were in the relationship ma. So it's like the kind where like where do you draw the difference and the line between having marriage in view and then having marriage in mind? Because like when, like, for example, like Joel and Fen, when both of you first got together, like the second date, you were not thinking like, I'm going to marry the person yet ma, right? Like there was still some time where you think like marriage was definitely in view, but marriage was not in mind, kind of thing. Like, am I phrasing this? But same like Marianne as well. Like your first 3 months, you're dating, but marriage was in mind, but marriage was not in view. So like, what was that click that I'm going to marry this person?
I can share first from my personal experience. I think I mentioned in previous episodes that because of certain things that happened in the past, I struggled with a whole lot of insecurity, with fear of abandonment, so that even if I enter into a relationship loving someone very deeply, I would have this tendency to want to run away so that I can abandon someone before that person abandons me. And that's very selfish, and it was in a way that I wasn't aware of my own selfishness. So I think that close to the 3rd month of our relationship, something very dramatic happened, and I actually wanted to break up with Daniel for no good reason at all. But the way that Daniel responded, to me, in the sense that he tried to, we went out, he tried to talk through the issues with me, to address the insecurities, or just to understand why I was doing this crazy thing lah. And at the end of it, I found myself looking at a man and saying like, this is a man who is very godly. This is a man who is willing to walk with you even with all of your baggage. So this is a man who is very mature and he loves you very much. Are you going to be like stupid, to let him go? And I think at that seriously, it's a bit like drama in your head, And so at that point, that was a turning point for me. That was when marriage it wasn't just the view of marriage. I like the way you put it, it's not just marriage in view, but it was really like seeing yourself being married to this person, because you are able to see Christ in him, if you understand what I mean. Yeah. So that was the turning point for me. I remember it very distinctly.
I mean, not so drama, but similar. Like you can just tell that this person is like someone that you can trust. And I feel like for us, it was one of our like fights. The fact that we are willing to like work it out, and the way we work it out, like we still, I don't know, it was just like we got better at working together. And I think that like you can always choose to like, okay, this is not worth the work, and then you have to decide like, oh, okay, am I gonna like break up? Is this better for the relationship, or push you like iron sharpen iron and then make you even better? Yeah, so in that case, you need wisdom, you need community as well. But I think what helped me a lot also is spending time with his family, getting to know his church community, things like that. And then, yeah, it's just very safe. I don't know.
Yeah, I would say two things for myself in terms of taking things like or having conversations on another level about marriage. The first one was, of course, as Ethan mentioned just now, was the different conflicts that we had. The conflicts were happening also because I think we cared for each other more, and our care and love for each other was like growing. And so because of that, um, what she thought was best for me and what I thought was best for myself, and vice versa, was causing clashes and causing conflict. But I knew the root of that was because we cared for each other, and she pointed that out as well. um, I think the second thing was that I must admit that majority of our courtship, I should put it that way, majority of our courtship was during MCO. So we were on and off in a sense an LDR couple, I would put it that way. But thank God for good spurts where we could actually date in person. And in that time, I really realized that in service and in our conversations about life and about faith, especially, I was not satisfied just being like that for a long time lah. And of course, maybe as I said, maybe it is our age that has caused us to be mature, or maybe where we are in life has caused us to be like that. Um, but even now, I tell her like I can't wait to be married because I know I will experience more of serving with her and serving alongside her and she with me. Yeah, so that was the reason why I think we went more in depth or more serious in our conversations about marriage at that time.
I think also like whenever like Joel comes to my house, like I see the way like my parents react to him and stuff. It's like it helps. Yeah, because I had an ex and it's very different. Yeah, so it's just I don't know, just yeah, this works. Yeah.
Yeah, that was also very interesting because every time I would go to a house, unlike my house, I think my parents are very expressive. Whenever I go to her house to even talk, I always have to ask her like, "Your parents okay? Are with me? Your parents okay?" Because I don't think their face shows it as much. But yeah, I'm glad that both families really see the similarities. We talked about that as well when we talked about age and race. In terms of their identity in Christ, and even when our dads or our moms or both sets of parents talk about church and faith, I think it's really a testament of them bringing us up lah, right?
Yeah, since you spoke about like you're talking about relationship with parents, so
Yeah.
I do recall one thing that I really appreciated about Daniel, and that was it linked up to family in the end because Daniel he had, I mean, both of us had baggage just to begin with lah, and of course Daniel had a baggage in which he struggled with same-sex attraction, and and he was open about that with me even before we were in courtship, even before we were in a relationship, and I think I think what really made me impressed, I would say, yeah, that's the word, impressed, or at least helped me to consider him, was that he was very honest about it, even when he spoke to my parents. And that's tough, so it's like if you're in a relationship with someone, you can be honest with that person, but when you sit down and when we actually sat down to talk to my dad about this, my dad of course had to ask him hard questions, because he's my dad, right? And I think Daniel, the way I observed the conversation was Daniel seeking to answer as honestly as he could. Even the stuff that would make you very uncomfortable, like things that went into his past, and my dad just being very confrontational, for the sake of protecting his daughter. So I really appreciated that as well. So honesty to the family. And Daniel was also honest and very supportive to my mom as well. So I think that was something else. Like you say, that relationship with family, that being able to be truthful and not being deceitful or hiding things, that was something that I really appreciated. That made me realize, okay, this is not just a marriage in view. This is like moving towards marriage.
The pursuit of the married life lah.
Yeah.
Nice. Maybe I just want to ask the single guys who are here. Yeah, because it's important to get your perspective as well. What important questions do you all see that you all want to ask before you even consider marriage?
One thing I cannot escape from is being okay with me working full time. Yeah, I think that would be one of the very important thing. Not as a selfish kind of way, but more so because like it's where I want to be like, and I want to do like, and in some sense like you don't have, like, I think there's a spectrum to it. Like one is like you don't even have to be full time, because if you're both full time, then yeah, usually it's easier to understand. You can still do your own job or whatever lah. But it's more about supporting. I think that would be like the one thing I'll look at. If you're able to support what I stand for, or as a Christian, or yeah, whatever it is, I think that would be very important. Yeah, because I would agree that the worldly things are very attractive. So sometimes like it's not as practical to live, not as comfortable lah. Yeah, that's the word I would put lah. Of course, it's good to be comfortable, but at the same time, like living on the edge is not that bad, I guess. I don't know. In terms of like faith,
full-time work is living on the edge.
The shorthand question is: are you ready to suffer with me?
yeah, correct. I mean, it is part of the Christian life anyway, but a different form of it lah. Yeah, because I've had friends who suffered dearly because of these kind of things that we didn't talk about in a relationship.
Yeah.
Where like one is like full time, and the other one is like, oh, I don't want you to be full time. Then like, how lah? How to proceed with that? You know, for example, and like because of hearing these kind of stories, I'm like, okay, that one need to talk about. Confirm to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah. Similar with Dylan, the idea of being okay with, you know, being with someone who is a full-time worker is something to think about and to consider. And yeah, I think that's one thing. I think I can't remember whether we discussed this in the previous video when we talk about how important faith is. That it's not just the idea of being a Christian, you know, like it's so much more than that. That understanding that your faith is so much bigger than just a sense of belief, but really a whole lifestyle and even the direction in which both of us want to go through in the future of, you know, hopefully serving in ministries together, not necessarily even full-time, but, you know, to understand that this is part and parcel of our life. And yeah, for me, one of the biggest thing was that one, acceptance of a partner who is a full-time worker. And yeah, that one, like, if the girl can't even get past that, then there's no point even talking to her. Yeah, and I think the other one would be like kids. I think children is very important because it's something to look at in terms of when you're starting family and whatnot. Me personally, I struggle with the idea of having kids. It's scary, and it's something that I would think like, okay, it's something that I would think about a bit more. Like say a girl comes, I'll have a lot of kids, I would hesitate. I would really hesitate on that. Yeah. So like that's for me. And I know this is something that even girls, like I know like girls who there are, you know, girls out there who want a lot of kids. And for me, I struggle with it. I do not know whether that's something I want or not. Yeah. So I think that's a very important point to just really values, core values and direction in life. Yeah.
Yeah, I think definitely, I mean, for those of you who are watching, I think you can go back again, like Kwang referenced to the second episode, I think, and the first episode about faith and church and why these two aspects are really important in a relationship. But I think the two aspects that Dylan and Kwang mentioned just now kind of ties back to a more practical element of life, that is money. When it comes to full-time work, you know, the preconception or the misconception, I hope that it's a misconception, is that full-time workers are badly paid and, you know, they are supposed to be the poorest of the poor. So, you know, I think that the more practical aspect of life would need more conversation about would probably be money and finances, and of course kids lah. But
Oh, I can just throw in one more.
Yeah.
I think the idea of where you want to be, as you grow older in terms of staying in Malaysia or going overseas, I think that's a very big topic to also discuss. I will admit there were one or two individuals who I did, consider dating, but first thing he told me, once I start working New Zealand, I was like, okay, bye-bye. And it's something that, like where your heart is, not just in ministry or whatever, but even like the people where you want to be, where you want to, put in your time and sow your seeds and things like that. And I think that's another thing that should be discussed. I have a friend who, I think they were in a relationship for about close to 10 years, but they are struggling because the girl wants to remain in UK, but the guy wants to stay in Malaysia, and they're just hanging on because they don't know life outside of being together. So I think that's something even you should talk about, even before getting together, and even more so before you get married.
I mean, I agree. I mean, thankfully, the full-time work aspect or life wasn't so much in question with my relationship with Ethan, because even from the beginning, she already said if there was anything that attracted me to her first, it was the fact that I was a full-time worker. So that was a very easy part of our conversation. Any other aspects, Marianne? Any other aspects about life that I think you think couples should talk about?
This is one that's practical, I think, and it's also intertwined with emotional and spiritual as well. I speak from experience. I think that if marriage is in view, it's very important for a couple to really sit down and talk about perhaps experiences, if they've ever had, with past relationships, and because that helps the couple to understand some of the baggages, that each person carries. And Daniel and I, we had extensive conversations about that. And in fact, beyond that, we also talked about incidences that happened to us growing up, which helped us to see how that kind of like, the scars that we had, the insecurities that we had, even the sinfulness, the sinful tendencies that we struggled with. And these conversations were never easy to have. Like you don't want to have this kind of conversations, because the person sees the ugly side of you lah. But if you really are seeing yourself making a lifelong commitment to this person, then there is this need to have honest conversations and to talk about these things with the person. And I think by the grace of God, right, when you have God's word and when you have His Spirit guiding you, it's almost like, I think for me, Daniel personally, it was a healing process. And I wouldn't say that we had trashed out all of our, not to say trash out, but reveal or maybe even confess to each other all of our past sins when we were working towards marriage even. But we were in that process. And I think even till this day in marriage, we're still in that process of working through it. But because we saw ourselves being married, I would say that I would talk to couples as that, have those uncomfortable conversations, because it will help you to grow in your relationship, and it will help you to see each other better. So I mean, the Bible tells us to confess our sins to one another as a family of Christ, and we are first and foremost brothers and sisters in Christ as well, right? So I think that's important.
Thanks, Marianne, for bringing that up, because I think when Yifan and I had conversations about what you just mentioned, I mean, pertaining to things like that, the baggages that came from our past, whether it may have come from relationships or other types of relationships, not just romantic ones. I think the conversations, what made it, what pushed me even more to consider even for marriage was because when we had these conversations, as difficult as it might have been, I don't recall feeling very uncomfortable. I felt quite comfortable being able to talk to her about it, and I think vice versa. And us being able to quite easily share certain aspects of our past, and even our present, and things we needed to heal from. I think that made it easier for me to think, hey, I can really trust this person. And trust is such a massive aspect in a relationship, because I think I trusted her, in many phases, because even if she didn't tell me, from our conversations, I know that she would want to do what is right. Either look for a mentor, or things that she has done even before meeting me, where she has already made a decision in her own consciousness, in her own mind, to put Jesus first. And that could mean finding accountability, on her own. And that was really comforting to me lah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think most of the things have been mentioned, but it's definitely easier to consider marriage when both people have worked a few years. It's much harder to like come out from uni and straight away like, hey, let's get married. Because then a lot of it you have to rely on your parents. And I think like the timing it's not so much like how many days you've been together or a couple. It's more of like God's timing, and like you can just see how things fall into place. And I don't know, it really like it helps a lot when you have reached a certain level of maturity or a certain level of commitment that you're ready to give when you go into a relationship. That's only when like marriage can be on the table. If like one person is totally like still wanting to just pursue their own career, not wanting to settle down, then it's hard lah. It's hard to bring up the marriage and commitment thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting lah, how we always go back to our faith, and how our faith will ultimately seep into every other aspect of our life. When we talk about trust, and even when Ethan talks about whether or not we are looking out for ourselves, if we surrender our whole lives to Jesus, we basically die every day, or we choose to want to die every day. And then I think, Marianne, in the previous episode, you talked about how when you get into a relationship, you're actually living for the other person. And so I really see that lah, as a reflection even in relationships. When Kwang even talked about how if one person just wants to go overseas and has made it so, is determined to go overseas no matter what doors open or what doors are closed, then really, are they really putting Christ at the center of their life? And if that's not the case, then how would you fit into that picture when they are the number one in their life? And Jesus is not number one.
The thing that Marianne, and actually a bit like what Joel and Fern mentioned also, like how important is the openness of your struggle with sin? I think that's the discussion mark, because you talk about having those difficult conversations. I think it would be like it'd be good to think about like how the struggle with sin is not the make or break, but it is the openness with how much whether you talk about it in the first place. Because I would be a bit hesitant if a partner comes up and then they're just trying to put out a front. I'm like, you got struggle or anything? And then it's this scary thing. And also maybe of a self-reflection about, and exactly what Joel said. I love how Joel mentioned about how you felt like it wasn't difficult with Ethan. Like even if you feel like I'm just struggling to share these struggles with her or with the girl, then there's also maybe the idea of trust with the girl. So like how much in terms of like the openness with your struggle, like how big of it does it play a role?
I think actually it goes both ways. I think picking up the line from talking about being comfortable sharing your struggles and your struggle with sin with say the person you are going out with and then having marriage in view with, I think it goes both ways in the sense that if the other person is godly, if the other person is kind, gentle, loving in the way, like, the response, right? If I'm going to share something with you, and I'm going to show you a very dark side of me that, that maybe I feel so ashamed of, right? And you respond to me the way it's showing me Christ-like love, right? I think that opens it up for me to be able to share more. But at the same time, if I am seriously considering that this is a person that I want to spend the rest of my life with, I'm going to work towards that, right? At least working towards that, then I would also challenge myself to say, yeah, I would rather keep all these skeletons in my closet. But if I really view this person as somebody I potentially could be spending the rest of my life with, then I would have to a certain extent and trust and make myself vulnerable to this person to be able to speak to him about things that I would rather sweep under the carpet, if you understand what I mean. It's not just telling the other person about sin, but in that process, you're actually confronting your own sin. You're actually confronting your own temptations or failures or whatnot. And so I think that there is this dual part where we need to play our part in responding to our partners, partners, right? To those that the person we are in a relationship with, to responding to them in a godly way. And on the other hand, challenging ourselves to be godly, to have courage and to have boldness and honesty in speaking about our struggles. I think that's important. Yeah, I think that's very important.
Yeah, I mean, I think it also, we talked in many episodes how, a man and woman ultimately should reflect Christ and the church, and I think when I think about that, there needs to be grace shown, just as Christ showed grace to the church, even though the church fails God, many times. And so I think the atmosphere of the relationship, should be one of compassion, should be one of love, should be one of grace, where, just as Jesus accepts the church as they are, Jesus doesn't let the church just stay stagnant like that. He wants to continue transform us, to be better people and to be more Christ-like. So in the same way, I think even as we show grace to one another, it is important that I do all I can to allow Ethan and vice versa to change for the better, to change to be more godly and more Christ-like as well. So it's not just about, oh, I accept all your sin and don't worry about it, and it's okay, everything. It doesn't matter whether whatever you're watching or whatever you're sinning, or it doesn't matter. I still accept you for who you are. Yes, we can accept we can accept the person, but we want that person to get better, and we want that person to continue to work out his salvation in godliness. So I am really thankful that she encourages me, pushes me, she just nudges me into that life of becoming more Christ-like, and I think vice versa. So I think it's more than just sharing what you struggle with and just leave it as that. It has to go one step further, because we are supposed to be in this for life.
I would compare it to how to put it, like if you have your own community of friends, it's like one level above that, because you end up staying with that person, like literally seeing them day to day, and that becomes like part of your life. Yeah, because maybe for us who are single or not married yet or anything, we cannot imagine that kind of intimacy, because that's kind of far. So the closest I could at the moment think of is your own close community, your own friends that you can count on. But it's one step beyond that, and of course there's more to that. There's intimacy, there's actual attraction to one another, and so for those who are thinking how does that even look like, think of your own community and think one step further. That's how I would tell that.
Yeah, I think that's a very good way to think about it. Not to say, maybe the word's not theoretical, but I would say that to think about it in a sense that I've not experienced it yet, but I can sort of kind of push it and imagine how it would be like. I think that's actually a very brilliant example for people who are still single and trying to figure out what we are actually talking about, those of us who are in a relationship or already married. Yeah, so that's a good one, Dylan.
Happy to relate. I was listening.
But maybe I asked a question to Marianne. Was there something after you got married that you felt, I wish we discussed this before we got married?
What a very good question. I think, if anything, and this maybe just particularly only relates to my relationship with Daniel because of the circumstances that we were in. I think Daniel spent a lot of time, more time was given actually helping me through my struggles, as a because I was dealing with health issues and various other challenges as well.
Yeah.
And I think as a girlfriend, I failed to be able to see more of his part of his own challenges. Yeah. And so I think going into the marriage, Daniel knew a lot more about my struggles than I did about him. And I think that we continued with this momentum quite a few years into our relationship, because I was just in and out of hospital, in and out of surgery, and so much attention was spent on just dealing with all these storms that came one after another. But when the storms quelled, I began to realize things about Daniel and how he was handling and processing things emotionally that I had never realized before. So I really do wish that maybe I felt that in that point of the relationship, there were so many ways in which I was very self-centered. Yeah, maybe very self-focused. And now just trying to learn to be more other person centered, and I wouldn't call it like, maybe it's making up for lost time. I'm not sure, but I still feel like I'm discovering things about Daniel today, so that our communication improves, and which is something that I didn't really do at the start of our relationship. So there needs to be a balance of sharing here and there, right? They cannot be too focused on one person. So if there's any lesson at all, maybe that's that. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, that was good. Thanks, Marianne, for the advice. I'm sure it's not just for Evan and myself, but for everyone watching who might not be married yet.
Yeah, I think like what Marianne said, kind of stuck also. Like I think in my relationship with Joel, I feel like he knows my problems better than I know his problems, or his problems seem more complicated than mine. So for me to understand his problems, it's like it takes me more time. And then for him to express his problems, so it's like, yeah, it's just like that. Then I'm like, what do you mean it's just like that? Yeah, so it's just, it requires time. But yeah, you need to like be aware of the other person. Like it always needs to be like other person centered. Yeah, that helps a lot.
Don't know if that's a girl or guy thing. Like
yeah, we talked about that in the previous episode as well.
Girl and a guy, like that's the differences.
So I also think throughout the episode we've talked about different aspects of life that should be covered rather than how long you should be together. So we talked about family, we've talked about money, we've talked about children. Yeah, we've talked about where to live. I mean, even that was a conversation between Yifan and myself, because I know many people have a stance that if someone wants to go, overseas, I'm an absolute no. Or the other way around, like Kwang was mentioning just now, he knew of someone who, right after studies or whatever, I'm out of here, I'm out of this country. But I've never really had a strong stance on that, even though I love Malaysia, and I believe that the reason why I'm born here and bred here is for a reason. There's a reason behind that. And I think Yifan felt the same way. But my stance has always been, if God calls me somewhere, that's where I will go. Whether or not I can accept it now, I just pray that God's desire will be my desire. That's the only thing I can pray for. I mean, because there have been many things in my life that has been like that. I think I shared with some of the youth before. If you've been with me in a camp or whatever, I've definitely shared. I never wanted to be a full-time worker. I never wanted to be a pastor. I never wanted to work in church. Before this life in SU and church, I was in the media industry, and that's something I never wanted to. I never started studying there. So God has taken me through so many detours. So if God calls me to continue to be in Malaysia, I would. But if God calls us to be somewhere else, or the door opens and God says, yeah, it's your choice, then I'm open to what God has in store for us. And I think that was something that was very easily agreed upon with Stephen and myself. And I think that conversation can only be had if your partner put Jesus as the most important thing in her life just as much as you do. So only when that happens, then okay, the conversation is quite easy. I can understand when couples have it difficult because the priorities are different. Yeah, so I think priorities, that's the other thing you have to talk about with your significant other. Where do you put your families, your extended families, because when you get into a marriage, then you're committed to one another more than your own parents. Where do you put that on the priority list? Church and ministries, as we have talked about just now with Dylan and Sekwang mentioning that. Yeah, I think the other aspect about a marriage that we need to look at is the moment you get into a marriage, that's when the husband becomes the head of the household, and whether or not the woman can accept the man being the head of the household, can she actually submit to the man as the head of the household? Marianne, you're already laughing. Maybe you can share with us how did that aspect of your relationship with Daniel, evolve or change from your dating or courtship life to your married life?
Oh, I'm so sinful.
Aiyo,
I would say that
like
as a very strong-headed woman, and as somebody who perhaps has the ability to speak in public, I realized that a lot of points in our relationship, I would be very dominant. And there were times where maybe because it seemed like I had more experience in teaching the Bible and things like that, I remember putting Daniel into like horrible situations where, when I think back, it would have demeaned him, so it would have made him feel lesser than the leader. And when I look back at those situations, it was just a very simple part of me wanting to be in control, wanting things to be a certain perfect way, and in doing that, being very ungodly. I would say that even when Daniel and I got married, I could verbally acknowledge his headship, but there were so many things when we were married that I didn't. Yeah, I just went ahead and did what I wanted to do. And I would say Daniel was very long-suffering because he silently, quietly, very much by example, just showed me that I'm trying to be a godly leader. I'm not trying to tie you up and make you do things that you don't want to do.
Yeah.
So you need to trust me, And so when I think through the storms that we have weathered through in our marriage, I saw for myself, like, if Daniel said no, it was because he was doing it for, at least he thought he was doing it for my good, and he was doing it because he loved me. And I think through the years, I'm seeing that better. I can trust him as the leader in a marriage. Instead, he was very gracious in saying that we could still go ahead and work through marriage together. So it's a process, you see. Yeah, it's a process. Yeah.
So from a biblical aspect, then, now with the feminist movement and women's empowerment and things like that, what would you say to people who think that women needing to submit to men is an unfair situation or an unfair thing to tell women to do?
I think that it comes back to understanding what headship and submission is really all about from scripture. So when we look at Ephesians chapter 5, right, verses 22 to 33, we see that headship, a male's headship in a marriage is not about treating the wife as a doormat, and saying like, everything I say goes under dictator now, you have no say, I regulate every aspect of this household. It's not that. If we look at male headship, I think we talked about it before, it's sacrificial servant leadership, right? Where the man is willing to be self-giving and self-sacrificial and do everything in the interest of his wife, at least seeking to do that, right? No, you don't do it perfectly all the time. And so if a wife is able to see her husband as that, as loving her in that way, then her role of submission is being able to acknowledge and encourage him to step up and be the leader, right? And it doesn't mean that her opinions don't matter. It doesn't mean that there's no room for negotiation. None of those things are those ridiculous things. And it doesn't even mean that she's a lesser human being, right? It just means that God has designed things so beautifully that people, different ones of us play different roles. And in marriage, the husband is to lead with servant leadership, and the wife is to sacrificially be able to entrust herself to her husband.
Yeah, that's brilliantly concluded, because I think even as we look to marriage, we can really see how brilliantly he made this, because God invented marriage, and the way he constructed the family unit through marriage is really a wonderful thing. Any other final words before we close?
All I can say is that I think it's normal, and especially when you're young, to not think about marriage or be afraid of it. But as you meet people who go through a certain stage in life or who are older, you can see that it's more beautiful than what you think, or how media portrays it. The Bible paints it in a very different way. So yeah, learn it from there, not from elsewhere. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Thanks, Dylan. Kwang?
I'll reiterate something that we talked about in a previous video. This statement, I think we should put it blasé out there. It's scary to hear a no, but it's even more scary to hear a yes. And honestly speaking, I think with that in mind, to really be serious when you go into a relationship. Yeah, having firstly a relationship in mind, and then as you work things out, then you can see having marriage in mind, and then slowly working out, then you see marriage in view, and then work towards it that way. Yeah.
B?
Yeah, like when you are in a relationship and when you have gotten to know the person enough, then yeah, you can start talking about these things. And it's very important to talk about these things. And also that's why people have marriage counseling, and it's very highly encouraged. So yeah, I think it's good to be able to talk openly and also like share stuff. Like just because you're dating a Christian guy or a Christian leader doesn't mean he knows like everything and he knows how to treat you in a relationship. So make sure like you're not scared to like talk to your friends, or like if something's not right. Yeah, like dating is a process. There's a reason why we date, and don't I just think like don't be too afraid. Like if the relationship doesn't work, you need to leave and stuff. Like you can, but just be wise about it.
My final thought is just that, again, the Christian life is, God teaching us that it's not about us. And even as Marianne mentioned just now, if the woman knows really what is good for her, she would submit to the man, because the man loves her with such sacrificial love, and, supposed to love her the way Jesus loved the church. Recently we had, I had a BGR talk with my youth, and our own colleague Juni actually told some of the youth who said, "Oh, it's unfair that the woman has to be under the leadership of the man." And Juni just said, women just submit to the man. Man, you have to die for the ladies." So that was Juni's conclusion. But anyway, Marianne, any final thoughts?
Yeah. Young people who have been listening to this podcast, I really, really do hope that our discussion so far has helped you to see why there's just that you cannot think about dating and relationship and take it lightly.
Yeah.
Because with all these considerations, I just pray and hope that all the questions that we have been addressing one by one would help you to see the seriousness of committing to a relationship, and maybe by God's grace, the beauty. Like you don't see it as a burden, but the beauty of it, and encourage you to pursue Christ, even as and to see relationship through the way that he means for us to see it, and not just how the world is painting it for us, as something fun and something you can take lightly. So that's my plea to any young person who's watching, or even if you're not so young, who's watching this.
Yeah. And with that, I just want to thank you all again for this really fruitful, interesting, fascinating discussion about marriage. I don't think we've had many of these, even in the office. So this is a very exclusive Eavesdrop edition, I would say. If you have not, please like this video right now before you go to another tab or close this window. Just hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, follow us on Instagram. We always welcome other questions as well. It has been so good to be able to talk not only to my colleagues, my fiance, but to people giving us feedback about our series on Let's Chat Eavesdrop Edition, about this relationship series. It has been just so good. And it's not over yet. This is only episode 8. We have a couple more episodes to go, and we will see you on the next episode of Let's Chat Eavesdrop Edition. See you all.